Welcome back, radio entrepreneurs, listeners, and fans. I'm producer Jillian King, and I'm excited to introduce you all to part 2 of the Fall 2025 FBA Family Business Panel Discussion. What does success look like in 2025? Next, I will introduce our panelists and the moderator for this discussion. We are joined today by Stephen Wilchins, founding partner at Wilchins, Cosentino & Novins, Richard Hirschen, partner at Gray Gray & Gray, Martin Lowenthal of the Bulfinch Group, Bill Tracia, President and founder of NBM, and Amie Geary, Vice President of NBM. Welcome. And lastly, Radio Entrepreneurs host and founder of Mage LLC, JDavis. Welcome, Jeffrey. I will now hand the conversation over to you.
Thank you, Jillian, and welcome back, everyone. I really appreciated our first segment together. I think we're going to get even more in depth in the second segment. You know, an area that I love to look at in organizations is really the transition process and culture of the organization. And I'm just going to tell you, one of the most common things said to me when I'm doing organizational input is people will tell me things individually, and I'll say, have you ever mentioned that, to the family? And they'll say, have you noticed what my last name is? And I go, yeah. Have you noticed what their last name is? And I'll go, yeah. They go, no, we've never talked about it because I don't have that last name. And I think that's one of the things in making the cocktail of a family business with executives work. And that is, how do you deal with people's resistance or even conflict, encouraging, let's say what I would call creative conflict within the executive team with the family so that the business is the one that benefits. Sorry, that was a long question.
Want to take it in?
Yeah. So I think that we all, my brother and I, we're all part of the senior management team. And so we, sit together. We have management meetings every month. We're meeting on a weekly basis. We're all involved. We're all distinctly responsible for different departments, different revenue numbers, different, areas of the business. And we've created this mutual respect amongst each other. So we, as far as culture, it's all very, very positive.
And the numbers are something that we benchmark. So when we sit at this table, we're all looking at the numbers. There's full transparency in regards to, what Amie's division did last month, what Nicholas and all my other managers, what they accomplished. So we look for better ways to enhance that number and grow the business. So we're all on the same page when it comes to sitting at this table. It's pleasing our customers, giving concierge service, and growing the revenue number.
Now, can I make the assumption there to just pick up on what Jeff said, that just in listening to you and how long some of your key people, non-family members, have been with you, if you created the environment and culture that when they see something that's potentially wrong or could be done differently, if they feel comfortable to sit down with you, in a respectful manner both ways and say, listen, we've got a problem here, we need to change this, or I think we should do that. Because eventually, if you don't, it's going to bite some way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. It's not always the largest business that succeeds. It's usually the most adaptive business. And I feel that, we are a very adaptive business, and we've been that way since 1985. I don't know all the answers, and I've always said that to my people, and I'm not afraid to hire people brighter than I am. So we sit down at this table, we discuss the pros and cons, make a informed decision, and go forward.
Right. How do you establish compensation for, when you're sitting around each key person that is explaining their performance? Is there a compensation committee, or does it all lead to you, Bill?
It's pretty much, go ahead, want to follow up on that?
And then if it does lead to you, at what point is there a thought of having a compensation committee?
So the compensation of all of our employees started with me. It's evolved over the years. We've had good consultants like yourself, Steve, to mentor us through these very difficult decisions, because compensation programs are very, very delicate. and you cannot change them once you set them up for each individual. It would be considered a takeaway if you did anything. So I'm very careful when I do have these conversations that we don't overcommit going down 15, 20 years down the road.
And Nick and I are like, we're part of these conversations now too. And that's been helpful to see, certainly within our own department, we have a big part in that, but just the company overall, so that we can learn from our dad and understand how he approaches things and understand how he, what he views as fair and what he's done, very successfully over the years in terms of incentivizing employees to stay, because we have a really great retention rate here. And so, a lot of that is culture and just treating our employees fairly. And so it's important for us to learn from my dad about that.
Amie, if you were and Nick were running the company, what would you change?
Her office.
This is your chance to throw your dad under the bus.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, my office is next to my dad. I think I moved myself downstairs, but it's a tough question. I mean, my dad obviously has run the company for a really long time, very successfully. So, there are things with the younger generation that, from a technology perspective, bringing on new services, we've expanded some of the services recently to include more managed network services, a lot of cybersecurity, water solutions, all those things. And Dad's always been very, very supportive of it. But, kind of differentiating our offerings in that way, will be definitely something that we look at currently, and we'll look at even more, once as the years go by. So, I'd be lying if I say we agree on everything, but we certainly are on the same page with most things.
I'm hoping we can go back to something from the end of our first segment. Bill, you had mentioned that the employees were all aware of the transition plan you have with the leadership at the company. And I was just curious how that communication was done. As you said, you're still working full time and you're still the president of the company and running things. So how were you able to handle that communication?
So when I brought my children on, it was like 13 years ago, and my industry was going through a buying frenzy. We had a lot of large financial conglomerates coming into our market, faceless warriors, corporations that knew very little about the business. And I could have sold my business at that point. And I never wanted to do that to the people that work for me, especially my most loyal employees. So I made the decision that it would not sell, that it would bring on my children. And that's why they embraced it and embraced them, that they have long-term security. There is nothing worse than a company hiring a young person out of college and 40 years later, when that person might be 62, 63 years old, selling the business. So I never wanted that to happen. I wanted my employees that worked the hardest to get the company to where it is today, to leave when they wanted to leave, not when somebody else told them to leave.
Great.
Well, I'll add to Rich's question. You plan and God laughs, the expression. And I know that three of my panelists work heavily in this area. Too often, something happens, fatalistic to a family member, and I'm not wishing it upon anyone. How have you prepared structurally, financing, maybe even through insurance, different programs to prepare for an eventual not prepared transition or changeover of family members? Have you prepared for that at all?
Amie?
Yeah, we've prepared a lot for it. So, I think my parents' estate plan is very much intertwined with the succession plan here, in terms of how we, what will happen. And I think that, we've done a lot of preparation to prepare for that day. None of us want to think about it, but we know how power will be, will go. We know who will run the business here. We know who will own the business. And I have spent a lot of time with just with my legal background with my dad and, and in terms of that planning, because
it's really two-tiered. It's part of the succession plan. What happens to the family? What happens to the two people in the business and the two people that aren't in the business? And Steve has done a great job in guiding us through that maze. And then the second thing is who takes control of the business, and how does that impact your relationship with the banks, your manufacturers, personal guarantees? So there's a lot in play, and there's only so much we can do today to plan for that. So I feel that if we get the family stuff in order, which I think we're zeroed in on that. We have a very good plan working through trust, our succession plan. The management of this company is stronger than any company in our industry. So I'm confident that my daughter Amie and my son Nicholas will thrive, and they'll be able to make decisions and guide the company into new areas that where I am a little bit older now, that I'm not so interested in keep bringing on more risk. Where, business is for the young.
Well, kudos on that, because a lot of families don't. And it's really nice to hear that you picked up on the change in potential change in relationship with bankers, vendors, and creditors, and other things like that, when a key person with like a family, someone like your father or like you guys, and next level leave the business either vertically or horizontally, it can happen. Oftentimes that isn't thought about. It can cause chaos if proper planning hasn't been done. So,
right.
Very thorough. And believe me, a lot haven't. And it causes absolute chaos.
I've made it a point to have my two children involved with my banks when they come in. They sit down with my manufacturers. Our manufacturers, one manufacturer, we might buy close to $10 million a year in wholesale copier equipment. I have a line of credit with them. So I don't personally guarantee anything. After being in business for 10 years, I just spoke to my bank and spoke to my manufacturer, say, judge me on my business, not on myself. If you want to do business with us, great. If not, we'll go elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think that it really is important for the second generation to be involved with those relationships, so that they have your bank, your manufacturers, your vendors. They already know me. They know my brother. It's just the goal is for it to be a natural extension of my dad. When someday we own the business and we're running it, and if something happens. So Dad's done a really good job of like you said, every time we're meeting with the bank, they know us, and so. It's really important, instead of having the event, when the patriarch passes away, that's not the time for the children to come into the business. We've been here a while, so.
Right. And both Amie and Nick are capable of having that, once again, C-level conversation with the manufacturer, with the bank, that they walk out of this room saying, okay, the business is going to be fine. Nothing changes.
I wanted to say, I want to compliment Bill, you and Amie, because very few clients are successful as well as spend the time to deal with the family issues and the succession issues. So kudos to both of you for all that hard work.
But that was very important, Steve, for me and Pam, that all four of our children were treated fairly and equitable. And that's difficult when you have two in the business and two out of the business. So, we've made many trusts, we've set up trusts that will take care of that. And we sit down with our family and discuss that. And we're going to start doing that on an annual basis, that it's important that you value in the business. Because at the end of the day, that's always the point of contention is, what's the business worth? So if I'm saying when I'm still breathing that it's worth X amount of money, and that's what it's worth. And we do that every year, and we'll get each of them to just, sign off on the value of the business. All the other stuff, real estate, money, stocks, whatever, that's easy. That's $1 a number. That's all that is. The business is the most challenging. Real estate, you can get an evaluation in a half hour on what your property is worth. So
when you're on a weekend, when there's a weekend, what is the Tracia family? Does it weave into business and pleasure, or how do you deal with that issue?
Can you separate family and business?
Always pleasure. We are fortunate that we have a home in Gloucester, the big home. My family is 22 people. We have 12 grandchildren under 13. So it's a
Chaos.
house.
Chaos.
It's a very busy house, and I love it. I love when they come up. Occasionally, we talk about business, even with the two that aren't in the business. They're always interested in hearing the success stories or listening to a story about how are we going to fix this. So, yes, it's impossible for it not to come up, and I've never had a rule that, we don't want to talk business in front of family. The family, it is your business, so they should know.
But we try to, leave it in the office and, enjoy each other, but it's kind of inevitable. Sometimes it seeps in, and usually in a positive way,
Yes.
Again, last question for this segment. Did anybody on the panel have a follow-up to that whole structural succession topic? No, they didn't. You mentioned the other two children when you're at family events. Has there ever been any need to sort of deal with jealousies or information and sharing of non-family working members? Because there are beneficiaries on both sides.
I don't think jealousy is probably the correct word. It might be the unknown, the mystery, maybe, that my two daughters that are angels that are taking care of the sick might see how well Nick and Amie are doing. So we try to always be as transparent as possible. Nick and Amie both work the same comp plans everybody else does that work for this company. So it's not like they're getting any more money for having the last name Tracia.
Great. I'm going to turn it over to our producer, Jillian King. Jillian, welcome back.
Thank you, everyone, for that compelling discussion of what makes a family business thrive. That wraps up part 2 of this fall 2025 FBA Family Business panel discussion. Thank you to all our listeners and viewers who have tuned in for this panel. Be sure to check out part 1 if you didn't already hear it, and part 3 of this discussion to hear more on these topics. And if you're a fan of our videos, please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and press that bell button. For more on this topic, tune in to our continuing series on family business success. Radio Entrepreneurs is also active on LinkedIn, so follow our page there as well for more business advice and topical business discussions all year round. Until next time, goodbye and thanks for listening. We'll be back with more stories on Radio Entrepreneurs.